Hey, in today's video, I wanted to talk about the quality of your product. The quality of your product is something that's very important from the point of view of your users, of your customers. It's very important that you achieve a certain level of high quality in your products. This might be something that is slightly different if you are just building the first versions of your product and you are working with a maybe relatively small customer base. In those cases, the quality of the product might be something that is not one of the most important things for your product, although I would argue that you still have to respect a certain level of quality even in that kind of product when you are in the very early stages. But what I want to talk in this video is what are some of the most important aspects of quality that you have to take into account when you're building products. And I'm talking about software products. If you like this kind of content, please give it a like. It helps me massively. So let's go through some of the aspects that you have to take into account for keeping the quality of your product. First of all, you want to avoid regression. Regression is probably one of the most frustrating things for customers. What happens is that something that used to work stopped working. That's something that people don't want to see. You could call them bugs. Sometimes there are bugs in the new features. That's not necessarily regression, but if it's something that used to work and suddenly it doesn't work, that's something that can be very frustrating for customers because it might be something that they're very used to in your product that gives them value, that always has worked. Now it doesn't. No, don't do it. Try to make sure that you avoid regression problems. The next one is that you want to keep the performance of your product always in a same level or make it better. Because what you don't want is that you make a new version of your product and, for example, opening a project or loading a page, loading a map, whatnot, suddenly is 3 times slower than it used to be. This is something that your customers are going to notice. If there are small variations like a 10% up or down, they might not even notice about that. But when it starts to be several seconds, something that is very noticeable, they are probably going to notice. If you're talking about smaller times, loading times, for example, a change in percentage might not be very noticeable. But if you are talking about, for example, when I'm editing a video and I'm actually exporting the video, rendering the video, this might take several minutes. 10%, 50% change is going to have a big impact on the actual export. So it's going to affect a lot your customer. This is important that you at least pay attention that you don't decrease the quality or the performance of the product at its current stage. And if you can improve it and you can make it faster, the performance, well, that's always better. And you should talk about it. The next one is that you want to ensure the health of your code and the integration testing. You want to make sure that the healthiness of your code is there. Code, especially code bases that are old, tend to have many problems. They tend to have many duplicates of methods that should not be duplicated. And they tend to have parts of the code that are not optimized. And this is something that you should pay attention. You should make sure that it's not degrading over time, because the more it degrades, the more difficult it's going to be maintaining this product in the future. It's going to get really expensive, whether you can believe it at this point, especially if you're in the early stages or not. And it's going to also get very difficult to create new features without breaking things that used to work, because the code health is not there. And the same goes for integration tests. So make sure that you don't ignore problems in your code and you just leave hacks down there and not pay attention to, at some point, improving them. I'm not saying that you had to have the perfect code all the time, especially every time that you are going to release something new, but you had to make sure that when you are building that up, that it can scale and that it's not going to become a problem in the future. The fourth is going to be manual testing. It's true that there are many tools nowadays to simulate manual testing of products, but regular manual testing is always a good way of checking if a product is still working and behaving as it should. And especially I think that where it's very important is if you are testing new features. Testing new features, sometimes creating the tests might not be that optimal, and it's great to have somebody that actually goes and does an acceptance testing for that new feature that you have created. after that, then yes, you could go and try to automate that process. The fifth one is going to be usability and user experience. Definitely a big part of your product quality is the experience, or the perceived quality of your product is the experience that your customers have with it. This is something that is really, really, really important, and something that sometimes in B2B products has been quite ignored. So something where you can distinguish or differentiate yourself from your competitors, especially in B2B products, is to have a great experience. So you want that your product is as much as possible user-friendly, easy to adopt, and easy to find the value that is going to benefit your customers. The next one is going to be security and compliance. You want that your product is secure, especially if you are doing something for, like, imagine banking sector or anything related to authorities. Security is going to be key. But it's not just that. Just think about all the data protection laws that there are nowadays. You have to make sure that all the information that you're keeping about your customers, their projects, whatnot, is something that is safe and securely kept, and something that you can demonstrate to them that you are doing that. Another important part of the product quality is that you are actually improving the quality or the product continuously. This is something that people have gotten used to nowadays, where there are things even in cars nowadays that have over-the-air updates. Well, not that many models really have it, but in practice, something that Tesla has introduced, and other products, other cars are actually doing this. But you have seen it in many products. You have seen it in many places where, I don't know, Netflix is changing over time and is adding more and more features, and Spotify, whatnot. Those are tools, products that are getting better and offering more things over time. I'm not talking about the content or the movies, stuff like that. That's a different story, because that's not necessarily the improvement of the tool, but of course that's part of the product quality from the perception point of view of the customer. And why is this important? Is because if it's not getting better over time, and I'm not talking about Netflix now, I'm talking about a product. If products don't evolve, don't get better, competition will catch up, will get better, and the products will become irrelevant. Or alternatives will appear that will be better for the customer needs and will take over that solution space. Another very important part of the product quality, and maybe something that is not so much talk, is the documentation and the support. Especially the support, when you think about it, it's something that many customers and many users are very used to, especially in certain countries and areas. They're used to just get a phone and get with some support person, discuss a problem that they have, and then the support person goes and fixes it. Chatbots tend to try to do the same thing, and sometimes there's also a support engineer behind the chatbot that you can actually contact. I have used it here in Finland, especially with the tax office, and it is great. They have usually people there that they can answer you and they can solve your questions right there. That is key. It gives me a very good impression of that tax office, because they're really helping me to use their product, which might not be sometimes that obvious, and maybe the documentation doesn't help so much. Although the documentation in this case is also pretty good and it helps you find information. But documentation always is going to include, or maybe sometimes not cover all the areas. Still, important to have a documentation, because it's something that your customers are also going to check to be able to do or perform certain actions with your product, or see how it solves certain problems. And as part of this, I would like to say that for me nowadays, a very important part of the quality is not just the documentation, it's also the onboarding on the product. And I think that this is a very important part of the documentation and the support. How do you get the users to use your product, to learn how to use your product? And documentation, support, very important keys there, but also tutorials or guides or whatnot that you can implement within the product that can help your users identify value on your product as soon as possible. Another one that is very important to keep the quality of your product is to have a version control and code reviews. This is very important, and I've seen it sometimes in some cases where something was implemented, and when it has gone to an acceptance review or an acceptance test by a product manager or somebody in quality, and they go like, no, this doesn't pass because there's not a clear version or a good version control, they cannot roll back those changes. And it's just like, no, we cannot do that. It's just too much work to get the thing out of there now. And that's a big problem. The same goes for code reviews. Code reviews is more like a practice process. It's a principle. It's just to make sure that you have somebody that goes and checks the code that somebody else has been writing. I see still many times nowadays companies that they just merge code without really anybody going and checking or peer reviewing that code. It's a kind of a big red flag because many things can potentially go wrong. Nobody usually knows perfectly all the code base of a product to be able to make a perfect code every single time and take into account all the potential ramifications of any change in the code. Somebody that knows the code quite well, like an architect, should typically review that code to understand if there is going to be problems or if something has been maybe ignored or maybe not taken into account. The last one is disaster recovery and redundancy. And this is something that many cloud services like AWS, Kubernetes, they offer this where you can actually have these self-healing instances that if something falls or the system falls down, it can actually get itself back up and running. Not everybody is still doing this. Here it's important, I see several times where, for example, a license management system actually falls down, it just collapses basically, and then you cannot handle the licenses of the users. Meaning that the product might be up and running, but because you cannot access the license server information, you cannot give access to the users. These are very big problems and something that you have to make sure that you have the proper recovery methods to actually be able to recover them as soon as possible. And also having the monitoring side that you can identify those problems when they happen or as soon as they happen so you can do a quick recovery as soon as possible. These are some of the aspects or different aspects of product quality. I haven't covered how to actually solve them, how to, for example, do test automation, integration tests, or UI tests, or how to have monitoring boards to actually be able to see if the different components are working. If you are interested in me going and doing a video to continue talking about this topic, please let me know in the comments below. But as you can imagine, product quality is something that is really important for companies to have in place to make sure that you have a good product that is serving the needs of your users. And this doesn't mean just features, doesn't mean just experience. It means everything that is around it so that the product is a rock solid product that is actually going to meet the needs of your customers all the time. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. It helps with YouTube actually showing this video to other people. I will see you in the next one. And remember, stay safe.